Hey guys, welcome to a very new video series we just launched in time for E3. This is the Wikia Stars Showcase, and this is where some of the best and brightest from Wikia's big communities get together to talk about some of the big news, big announcements, big pop culture topics that are out there today. So what better way and what better place to start this than with day zero of E3? This is the big day where all of the big companies and studios, etc., have their press conferences. So this isn't necessarily open to, I say the public in quotes, because the show itself isn't open to the public, but this is invite only, and a lot of times they're pretty stingy. So you guys, our participants here, were really lucky and are going to provide us with some great insight. So with that said, let me introduce the folks. First up, we have our programming manager from the video games vertical, Miguel Lopez. We also got our community development manager from the video game vertical, George Albor. And last but definitely not least, we have a Wikia star himself joining us from the UK techno side. So, Miguel, I'm going to start with you. I think lots of bombshells dropped today. What is the biggest one, in your opinion, that was thrust upon us all?
Without a doubt, the biggest one is the news that came out of the Sony, the PS4 conference. In a nutshell, basically, Sony has declared that they're not following suit with Microsoft and they're not implementing all of the onerous DRM that Microsoft is implementing with the Xbox One, which, drew a lot of cheers, and it served as a huge relief, I think, for a lot of people who were dreading what this coming console generation was going to look like. One where you can't sell your games as easily as you do now, one where you can't lend your games as easily as you do now, and one even where you can't play your games unless you have steady and consistent access to the internet. So I think a lot of folks were rightfully, uneasy about what that would look like, but at least for another generation, or at least until Sony changes its mind, it looks like business as usual for now, which is a great relief, at least for me.
Cool. Now, George, you were live tweeting from a bunch of these events as well. Would you agree with that, or do you think there something else that was kind of equally as bombshelly?
I think that Microsoft knew when they were getting into today's press conferences that they had a lot to prove because they were already earning so much flack from their decisions at the last press conference when they announced that there's all sorts of sort of archaic DRM things and features that are part of the Xbox One. But even though that they announced all of those games, I think everyone, for the most part, were paying attention to that big conflict between Sony and Microsoft, right? What would it look like when they finally bumped heads? So I think I agree with Miguel. I think the biggest bombshell today was Sony not just whispering it, but shouting it from the rooftops that they're taking a different path in terms of their relationship with their users than Microsoft is. And I think that that hit home the most when they announced their pricing. Microsoft announced that they're selling the Xbox One for $499, and Sony announced that they're selling theirs for $399. So I think that for a lot of players, when they're deciding which of the consoles to go for, right now is the time when people are sort of trying to weigh their options and trying to look at both sides. And Sony, I think, really knocked it out of the park today when they said, look, where you can play used games, you don't have to connect to the internet, and guess what? We're going to be $100 cheaper than Microsoft.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to keep it on the console tip here for a second then, and I'm going to shoot over to techno side. George brings up a good point. I mean, well, both Miguel and George. Miguel was talking about some of the actual logistics of the consoles themselves. George was talking about pricing. I mean, which of those kind of stick and resonate most with you as the end user?
Well, as a big Microsoft fan, I've got to say I'm going to have to stick up with the Xbox One. I can't help myself. I mean, yeah, the Xbox One is a lot more expensive, and it's going to be a lot harder for the average gamer to be able to afford the Xbox One compared to the PS3. But you still have to take into account that the Xbox One does have to connect, does have a few more modules, and it is designed to be now an entertainment module more than a gaming module. But yeah, Miguel is completely right that PlayStation 3 is definitely carried on with its focus on gamers rather than consumerism, and that it's allowing the gamers to still play as they were usually, while Microsoft is sort of focusing on pleasing the producers, the developers, by stopping this selling used games.
Now, will you, again, as the end user, are you going to come at it strictly just from a gaming perspective, or will you actually use the new console for some of the kind of mainstream entertainment purposes that they're pushing?
I use my Xbox 360 to watch Netflix, etc., and it'd be quite nice to watch more of these TV shows, and definitely with the Halo TV series coming out, I've got to get the Xbox One and watch that.
Okay. Well, Miguel, let's kick it over to some of the big kind of game title news, because a lot of titles were thrown out, a lot of titles that we've heard before in the past, and it's been a while, and they kind of have popped up again. So give me one of your kind of favorite game titles that came up today.
I'm gonna go with what I believe to be a dark horse. The game called Below. It was announced at the Xbox One press conference. It's by a studio called Capybara, who have made a lot of, they're an indie developer par excellence. They're kind of the one that you think about when you think about indie games. It's kind of they're kind of like the archetype. But yeah, I mean, for one, it was kind of odd to see them in the Xbox One conference, just because those kinds of policies aren't immediately what you think about when you think about indie games, and particularly a studio like that. But yeah, that seemed cool. It's a roguelike game done in the style of Sword and Sorcery, which is a very evocative visual presentation that it just carries her trademark really well. And they didn't show a whole lot of it, but what they did show was just a very slight teaser that just kind of hit all the right notes for me. That was one that was impressive. And I think Respawn's game looks really cool. Brings up an interesting point too. Like, Microsoft does have, inarguably, it has the more sort of onerous scheme, right? Like it's more restrictive, and it's kind of troubling to players. But they haven't made. I don't think they've made an effective argument as to why they're requiring all of this. All of these restrictions, like. There might be compelling reasons for some games to always be online, right? Like they might be, they might have really interesting persistent worlds. They might be doing interesting things with the network of cloud servers that they're talking about establishing. I suspect that Respawn's game might be one of these, but again, they're not speaking about how that stuff is going to work aside from in the abstract. And I'm curious in particular what Technoside thinks about that, because that is kind of like, that is kind of what they're giving us in this bargain. But, do you think that they've been specific enough to really justify all the DRM and all the sort of constant online connections and all that stuff?
I know it's really hard to say, because I don't think I could answer that question until I sort of experienced this online having to check in every day, etc. myself. I mean, yeah, it's a bit scary the thought of having to check in is restrictive, but at the same time, it's not really affecting me personally, because I have a good internet connection quite a lot. I guess it's when I've got a poor internet, then it'll start affecting me quite badly, and then I'll understand.
Right.
Well, what about the other stuff?
Oh, go ahead, Miguel.
Yeah. What about the other stuff? Are you concerned about an inability to share games with your friends, to resell games once you're tired of them, or you want to get something else? Like, is that an issue for you?
Well, I'll have to admit I'm a bit of a game hoarder. I do keep hold of my games and don't trade them in, so that won't affect me. But definitely sharing games is definitely going to affect me. Because with Lara Croft recently, I didn't want to spend the money to get that. I borrowed my friend's version, which made me enjoy the game. And I guess losing that kind of ability will be quite damaging to Microsoft and the gaming industry.
That's a great point, actually. Discoverability, right? Like you said, borrowing a game, renting a game to discover whether you like it and want to own it and invest that kind of time with it. George,
yes.
Big game title today. Which one?
I'm going to have to... I'll quickly side with Miguel, because I think that Titanfall, they were pushing hard, and it's very clear why. The game looks absolutely gorgeous. There's some really cool stuff that the trailers showed today with mobility and the sort of way that in a first-person world you can jetpack around the level and double jump, but then hop right into a mech and get into the battle as this sort of huge armored core-like beast. I think that's really cool. So I have high hopes for Titanfall. But the two big ones I want to talk about, we didn't actually see the gameplay footage of. They sort of just announced, but they carry so much weight when you just say the names. And that is Mirror's Edge 2, which has been in a long time coming. EA announced that today from DICE. And also from DICE, Star Wars Battlefront. EA just picked up all of the licenses from Star Wars after LucasArts went under, and there were rumors that Battlefront was going to make an appearance, and they announced it today. It is, in fact, in the works. Both games are in the works, and while they're far in the future, those two titles, I think, more than a lot of the others, just make me super excited to see what these games that we've been waiting for so long will look like on a console that is going to provide something that's so much more than what we currently have.
Technoside, do you agree with that, or was there anything that kind of resonated with you today that neither of these guys mentioned?
Well, Battlefront 3 was definitely amazing. I've got to agree with you there, George. I remember countless hours on Battlefront 2 playing with my friends around on the LAN connection. But
Yeah.
I guess I have to play it safe with the fact that I'm a huge Halo fan. And Halo 5 announcement today was massive, and so was the Destiny announcement.
I was about to say Destiny Techno. That looked pretty cool, right?
Yeah, it's insane. Can't wait.
Yeah.
Great amalgamation of MMOs and first-person shooters. You can really see the Halo characteristics in it, but at the same time, I guess you can sort of see World of Warcraft and all the other MMOs sort of built into this, but subtly. It fits it very well.
Does anybody care about the Kingdom Hearts announcement that was made today? Anybody?
A lot of people care. A lot of people care about Kingdom Hearts. I'm not one of those people, but I know that when that trailer came on, that was a big deal.
Well, and I will say
That was
this. Yeah, well, and think about it. You know, Disney owns now Lucasfilm.
That's right, yeah.
Pixar, Studio
So-
Ghibli. So
Guess who's making an appearance in the next Kingdom Hearts then? Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader. Don't be surprised. I'm calling it right now.
well, we got to wrap this up, but I do want to really quickly, Miguel, just ask you anything out of the Ubisoft conference that of note that you particularly want to address.
I think, I mean, Watch Dogs, looked very impressive. I know that game is coming soon. I've kind of been in a bit of a blackout for it, so I haven't been too keenly following it. But after seeing it today, yeah, that looks very much up my alley. And this wasn't in the Ubisoft conference, but I will be remiss if I did not mention Dark Souls 2. That's going to be playable at the show floor, and as soon as I get a spare hour during E3, that's the first thing I'm going to go play.
Good point. I'm going to ask the remaining two. Technoside, what are you going immediately to play as soon as you get on the show floor?
Destiny, definitely. I'm going to have to seek out the Sony booth and then straight away go to the Destiny section.
George?
God, there's going to be so many things to check out. I think I'm going to be right there with Tech. I think I have to say Destiny because, Bungie's been in the works for this thing for so long, and there's no one like them in the industry still, so I can't wait to get my hands on it. Yeah, Destiny.
Cool, guys. Well, listen, we're going to wrap it up for this first episode of Stars Showcase, but fear not, we are actually going to be back the next 2 days, day 1 of E3 and day 2 of E3. So we're going to record one of these each night. We have a ton of other great coverage as well. We've got quizzes, we've got photo galleries, we've got Technoside is going to be blogging. So be sure to check out our video game hub at www.wikia.com/video_games.
That's right.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. We'll hit you back tomorrow.